social innovation is perceived as a foreign concept because we don't recognize that the park in our community and the fire department in our community were social innovations, and that big history is a big history gap. I'd say that we have a big history gap for each narrative of the present that has not gotten its due in culture. Those are all narrative gaps, right? And the continuation and support of those, addressing those narrative gaps, is a collective opportunity. We put a call out to the world last week to create, we found 50 of the 50,000 universities in the world have a quote unquote global pro bono club, and the other 99.9% don't. So we put a call out to students at all the other ones to create a global pro bono club at all the universities that don't have one, to then cooperate on solving major collective challenges through that context, because we don't think that it should be a narrow prerogative of retirees to address global problems. They talk about the old model of decades ago was once you're retired, then you give back, right? And so, what we're democratizing is the all generations, all hands on deck, all the time, too many problems for us to have the majority of the world's population on the sidelines. I spoke this morning about the service learning singularity of what happens when 500 million people realize that they're in a field that has more than 1 million people learning it, and every field with more than 1 million people learning it could be most efficiently learned solving a global problem and building on all the materials that are autodidact accessible. So I think the context for saying, how do we get all the stakeholders who are on the sidelines in the game against global problems is important. But in order for that to be a matter of their individual capability, we need to figure out a way to give each individual better odds against the interdisciplinary complexity than World War I soldiers or any of the other metaphors that we have for why each person shows up at a problem, feels overwhelmed, and runs away. I think what we need to figure out is how problems of profound complexity do not become as intimidating as Goliath would be to David if David only wins one time out of 1,000. How do we turn the fundamental nature of knowledge into something that is in support of individual agency through camaraderie and collaboration against these challenges, rather than where we're each, right now I feel like we're structuring knowledge so every human is surrounded, every human gets ganged up upon by all the disciplines they don't know, and each person loses 999 times out of 1,000, and then sometimes you get a polymath who finds their way, right? And how do we turn the human race not into laggards against modernity, by which I mean feeling always behind the disciplinary convergence, and how do we get them into synchronized with modernity in terms of their capabilities? How do we get as much agency as the grand intellectuals a few hundred years ago who felt like they could tackle all the fields because there weren't very many and knowledge was locally relatively new? How do we get that level of agency, but for individuals against collective challenges?